It's Indiana game week. Penn State takes on Indiana 7:30 at Beaver Stadium. Penn State football practices tonight. We will be there to give you our impressions of what's going on at practice with the Penn State Nittany Lions. I'm your host of the BWI Daily Edition, Thomas Frank Carr. That's Nate Bauer, senior editor. We're going to talk about what we're expecting tonight. We're going to talk about what we heard from James Franklin yesterday, and of course, give you some previews of Penn State and Indiana. Nate, I watched the film today, so I have a better idea of what Indiana is, and that is I don't really know. So
come on.
We'll get to that in a minute. I'll explain what I mean. It's like not to say that I didn't know what I was watching, but it's just one of those situations where football can be a weird game, and you can have one team one week and a completely different one the next week based on who you're playing. So we'll get into that in just a little bit. But Nate, you have some thoughts about yesterday in James Franklin's press conference. I think we're kind of on the same page about what we took away from James's interaction with the media, but just give me your impressions and what you thought about while James was answering questions during his Tuesday press conference.
Yeah, he's tired of the circus, maybe, is I don't know. Like, that's probably the wrong way to put it. And you have to choose your words carefully in a situation like this, because it's not like the questions weren't relevant. I think that they are, but very clearly he's got a juju kind of deal going on right now where keep your head down and plow ahead, right? Like that is the fundamental subtext of everything that he said from even before the season. And like just in general, that's his kind of mantra is just keep your head down, plow ahead, get better, make improvements. And so coming off of last week against Villanova, when he felt like their practices leading into that game and then the performances in the game were not quite up to the standard that he was anticipating or expects, to come back then on Tuesday and be asked about last year's Indiana game and how much of a grudge factor there is in this year's game, to be asked about
all the things that aren't on the football field that he's concerned with, right?
Totally.
Yep.
And so like, he's lamenting the fact that he feels like his players are being patted on the back too much, right? Like, oh, they're reading press clippings and, what have you, right? But everybody's telling them how great they are because they're the fourth ranked team in the country. And you and I were talking about this earlier. Being the fourth ranked team in the country, that means you're there, right?
Right.
And Penn State beat the teams that it needed to beat to get there, right? Like you went on the road at Wisconsin, that's legit. You beat Auburn at home, that's legit as well. However, the path to number 4 from 22 to start the season has been condensed into 4 weeks, 3 weeks, really, right?
Yep.
So this is a program where everybody in front of it has kind of dropped off the map and dissipated, which is not to say that Penn State doesn't deserve to be ranked the 4th team in the country. I just think that the conversation would be very different if everyone in the top 10 had won, right? Like if no one had lost in the top 10, right? If Clemson doesn't have 2 losses, if other teams that had started the season ranked in the top 10 had not fallen off so quickly, then Penn State wouldn't be at number 4 right now. And not only would Penn State not be at number 4, but what we're talking about, right, which now is people talking about the playoff, and they're 4 weeks into the season, and James Franklin, like that, I don't want to put words into his mouth, but you could see his head start to explode yesterday.
Right.
Like,
the questions are all about the distractions he's trying to eliminate. And to be asked about those things and have that all be the focus and not be on Indiana, for him. And truthfully, the questions rarely are about the next opponent. And this is mostly about your team, what'd you do last week, your team going forward, your thoughts on X, Y, and Z of your team. Because even on Tuesday, And as I said, like most of us haven't, if we watch the film, we haven't watched the film yet by Tuesday. We're still wrapping up everything from the week before. So it's rarely, but his you're right. His response to I think everything yesterday and his general demeanor was to kind of be, I don't want to say at odds, but like to make a clear statement that it's not about any of those things. It is really hard right now, hard going to get everyone to focus and pull in the right direction because it has worked so far, and it's easy. It's human nature to let up. When you've built up a lead, it's easy. It's human nature to let up. And that is something you can't do at any point during the football season, and that success going to people's heads, in the building is probably a real thing. And James talked about it the previous week of basically that. It's hard to get everyone to focus and to be internally motivated at all times. So that was an interesting part of yesterday, aside from what he said, how he said. I texted you, I'm like, he doesn't seem like he's in a great mood today.
Well, I think look, like you can't just look at it through the lens of this year, and you can't even look at it through the lens of just last year. This goes back to 2019 when they were in this spot. They were number 4 in the country.
Yep.
And they were 8-0, and they went out to Minnesota, and they lost that game. And he gets it. He has lived through this. He talked about the opportunity that's at hand, right? And how to take advantage of the opportunity is by following the methodology and the path that they've taken to this point. And so what he's saying, these are things that are out of his control. So he might want to control it, but he is saying, not just to the media, but the media as a liaison to the broader public, hey, you talking about this constantly is taking your eye off the ball. And not only taking your eye off the ball, but it is an active distraction. It creates an active distraction in what the program and what his mentality is in what he wants to happen, right? So,
right.
I think without saying it, if James Franklin could have said in his press conference yesterday, hey, I want everyone who sees Sean Clifford this week to say, hey, why'd you miss that check down on Saturday? That he would choose that. Right. That would be his desire, is to have everyone just take a step back and knock these guys down a peg.
Right.
Because it's funny to me, I don't see that out of the players. And obviously I don't have the same vantage point as James Franklin, but at no point have I gotten the sense that these guys are even out of the woods psychologically from last year.
But it's about driving them in the right direction. Continue. This is the same thing that we see from Nick Saban all the time. The king of how do you handle success and how do you drive players to think that their bleep doesn't stink. Well, that is one of the ways is through the media, through this particular conversation. That being said, you want to be 4th in the country. You want this position. This is the place you need to be going forward. And I imagine there's a certain amount of tension that comes with that as well, of now that you're here, don't mess it up, which I think is what you're saying essentially, is the translation. Yeah.
No, but I think he would choose, and they would choose to be 10th, 9th, 8th, you know what I mean? Progress through the season before you just pop in and this is an unfinished product.
Yes it is. And by the way, if James Franklin or any of the players have any need to have some of those course correcting conversations, just check out the comment section on any of the stuff that we do, because it's one of two things. It's this team can't run the ball. You have to run the ball, and if you can't, you're a fraud. And then if it's not that, then it's some other thing about, and we'll get into one of these conversations, or we already did this week. I actually didn't choose this conversation to talk about on the show today, of is Tariq Castro-Fields going to be replaced because he's been okay? So there's always a question from some fan about why aren't you perfect? And if you need that, You can just check. Let me know. I'll send you the messages.
Illustrated.
Yeah,
subscribe.
That's a great point. I need to get that up so that we have that ready to go. But one thing that I want to know is, given all of that, how are you looking at what you're expecting from practice tonight?
A certain level of intensity that I think that we were asking about last week is, does it look like they're going through the motions? And look, like, let's not try to represent this as anything other than what it is. We go in for 20 minutes on the front end of practice when they're going through ball security drills, right?
Right.
Like
Positional drills sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. There's no, in the past, we had seen occasionally 1v1s, but, typically at least the 1v scout, right? Like we saw more team periods rather than individual periods.
Yeah.
In the past. And so to see individual periods, I think, to me, and this is always the bellwether, is how loudly are the coaches yelling at their players, right? Like what is the tenor of the conversation at this point? And I'll be very interested to see that tonight, to see exactly what that looks like, because not only did they not meet that level of what he wanted last week, right? So, I mean, they even said, hey, Wednesday specifically was the day that he had to kind of lay into them a little bit. But that's the media day.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's the media day. That's the day that we're there. So, they will have an active awareness, I would think, of what they're putting out there when we're there. And so the question is, how do they look? How do they look? What's the attention to detail? How much are the coaches getting into these guys? And go from there.
And speaking of, if you want to get Nate's reaction to what he sees tonight, bwi.rivals.com. You can visit bluewhiteillustrated.com for the latest Penn State football and recruiting news. Join us inside the Lion's Den, where you get some premium forum access for more of the insider information. I was on there today answering a lot of questions about the run game. Again. Well, we're going to get to some of that today. The October issue is on newsstands and features Penn State's Freaks List, other exclusive content. Learn more at bluewhiteonline.com or by calling customer service at 800-421-7751. Or, of course, subscribe to our YouTube page so you get all the information and content here. That's youtube.com/bluewhiteillustrated. Or, as I've always said, just put in Blue White Illustrated anywhere into Google and you'll find us. So that's what I always do. In fact, that's how I do research for, like, what have we talked about? I'll just Google Blue White Illustrated and see what we've talked about recently.
You got to tell them, T. Frank, you got to hit the bell.
Yes.
For the notifications, and then you got to hit the like button, and then you've done your job for the day.
Yes.
Thank you, public.
Yes, please. And by the way, I am in a now, as I say it out loud, public competition with some of our cousins and coworkers, and we were just burying people in the month of September. But the last couple days slowed down a little bit. So guys, tell your friends about the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. We're doing all kinds of crazy stuff here on the channel that nobody else is doing. So if you want to support that, make sure you tell your friends you like the videos, you find random strangers, you grab their phone, and you hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. That's how you help out. That's how we keep doing this.
I got a question for you. I hate to pull us off of this train, but
sure.
You touched on the running game.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that always fascinates me a little bit. What did you think about what Franklin said about the run game in terms of how truthful was he being that it is a cornucopia of small issues that all need, right? Like it's not because we always just want to point our finger at one thing. We want to see the offensive line, running back, right? Like whatever it is. And he always just takes this. I think it's more forthcoming than people give him credit for.
No,
like,
it
I think
is.
He says, "Oh no, this is what it is. Is we're just we're not quite there, but we're pretty close, and that's actually reality.
So here's a couple of narratives that have come out of the first part of the season so far that I don't think are particularly truthful, but it's how people feel based on what they see on film. First off, it was an FBS offensive line playing an FCS offensive line, and at times it looked like it, on Saturday. There were 2 or 3 yards down the field, guys getting ass over tin cups pushed over by the Penn State offensive line. So it wasn't like Penn State was unable to move people off the ball. They got 3 yards of separation from the line of scrimmage at times. And some of that was Mike Miranda. That, again, is one of those narratives of Mike Miranda can't handle a nose guard in his face. He has struggled at times, and again, give credit to Auburn. That nose tackle's really good. Fish McWilliams, the backup nose tackle for Auburn, is a 5-year starter and is a guy that I've watched going back to my first years at PFF doing film analysis, that he's a really good football player. Now, is he an NFL player? I don't know, but he is a gigantic human that knows how to play football very well. So sometimes you do just get beat by another guy, but Mike Miranda specifically hasn't been so terrible. And one of the questions that we keep getting, you and I keep getting, is there anyone to step in? Can anyone take over? And it's not only the domino effect, but when James Franklin says, and the domino effect, I'm meaning you take one guy, you move him to this position, you take this guy, you move him to another position, you take another guy, you insert him here. What are the consequences of doing that? It's not just that, but it's on a single play, maybe the tight end misses a block. Maybe Rasheed Walker, who's been one of the best offensive linemen at making those highlight plays, maybe he misses a block on the second level, and it should have been a 15-yard gain, but then it's a 4-yard gain because on a quarterback power, if you miss that block, that misses the seal for the hole, and Sean Clifford's not a guy that's going to break a tackle of a linebacker necessarily. Or maybe it's the fact that one guy specifically is not doing well in a particular scheme, and on the backside, he's not getting to his block on a consistent basis, but the rest of the offensive line is performing reasonably well at it. So yes, it's one little thing here, it's one little thing there. This is why the running game is such a frustration. And this is why the running game to me is like, you're kind of missing the point of, it's hard for everybody to run the football. Even good running teams are traditionally getting 4 or 5 yards of carry. And if Penn State's getting 9 from their bubble game, why should I care? And I understand that if you are good at running the football, that makes Penn State a perfect team, and then their offense is phenomenal, and then, yeah, you can say then they can beat anybody in the nation. And like what we've talked about, is that reasonable to think right now? Are they the 4th team in the nation? I think there's so much left to be written in all of these situations that it's unfair to then go to 11 on some of these conversations, because it wasn't as bad as it seemed on Saturday, and it is a bunch of little things that add up to something that happens in the run game not working.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I have nothing to add to that, because that is look, Noah Cain didn't play on Saturday.
Right.
Does that matter when your
Right.
top running back doesn't play? And I get it. There's the pushback to that is, oh, well, Noah Cain's not that great. I disagree.
Right.
I think Noah Cain is. I'm not saying whether he's great nationally. I'm saying, is he great against his peers at Penn State? And the fact that Penn State has decided that he deserves a 2-to-1 ratio of possessions to his peer. Now, again, like, has he taken the ball and run with it to the point where he is the unquestioned number 1 period prime back? No, they want to get those other guys some carries. There's no question about that. But he has done enough, not just carrying the football. And James Franklin brought this up yesterday. Catching the ball out of the backfield.
Yes.
Pass blocking. Right? Like he has done enough in these other elements. Like it's always more than just following the ball.
Yes.
Which is what we all do. That's how I watch football, is I follow the ball. People ask me how the offense, right? Like, I didn't see that. I saw where the ball went. At least live. Like,
that's what I'm here for. That is
what you're here for.
Yeah.
Well, but what I don't understand is, how do you watch the cornerback, right? Like, on a run play. If
Right.
I can't.
No, it literally is impossible to watch football and understand everything that's happening on the first run through. Like, so just as an insight, and you can watch one thing or the other. And here's a tip. If you want to know what's happening, watch the offensive line first, the offensive and defensive line first at the snap, and that'll give you a good indication of where to take your eyes next. So let me give you an example. If it's a run play, and this is where RPO is hard for linebackers, the offensive line is run blocking on every single play that's an RPO or a run play. Unless it's a called pass play, they are only run blocking. So then you watch the offensive line. Then you go to the quarterback exchange. After that, you have to immediately shift your eyes to the secondary. And that's when you look at the linebackers, and that's where you look at, and your peripheral vision has to be really good when you're doing all this stuff. But
I'm blind. I can't see.
Well, you're watching it live too. So the advantage you have at the stadium is watch the secondary. So if you do want to, you may miss some of these run plays, but watch the secondary. How many safeties are deep? 1 or 2? Where are the corners positioned? That'll tell you what the defense is trying to do on the coverage side, which will then indicate sometimes if it's going to be a run or a pass. This is all what the quarterback is looking at pre-snap. So if your head is spinning,
2.5 seconds.
You got the 15 seconds and then the 1 second afterwards to confirm or deny. So that's how hard it is to play football. Is you've got to understand all of that stuff and to have your landmarks immediately ready to your vision and make sure. And this is a thing that this will get into an Indiana preview. This is what Indiana's really good at. Is they'll have 2 safeties deep, and all of a sudden, it's not that coverage. It's not in that coverage family. It's something totally foreign. And that's something that you're going to have to, if you're Sean Clifford, make sure you're aware of. If that safety's creeping down pre-snap, does that mean it's changing the coverage scheme? And this is where if you get in tune with some of this stuff, you can kind of anticipate what's happening. I'll be watching football and I'll be like, interception. Just because of the way the quarterback is acting in the area he's throwing the football, and he'll throw a near interception. It may not be intercepted, but a guy will make a play on the ball. That's what your quarterback has to be looking at, and if he gets fooled, that's when the big plays happen. And to me, this is leading into the conversation about Michael Penix, is that that's an area that he's been struggling with so far this season. What are your general opinions on Michael Penix last year and what you are thinking about going into this game, considering what you've seen from him just in general throughout his career?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think that there's any question that Penn State will approach it, particularly with the way that Penn State has been creating takeaways. They're gonna want to feast on that. They're going to want to confuse him and throw different things at him, get pressure on him in the pocket, and while not letting him break contain and pick up a bunch of yards on the ground. But yeah, create some interceptions. And I mean, it would seem to me, obviously he's had. I ran the numbers yesterday. What did he have? 3 interceptions. He's thrown 6 interceptions, right? And 2 of them have been, he's thrown 3 and 3, right? Like he's had 2 games without an interception and 2 games with 3 interceptions.
Yeah, I think he's thrown 7, or he's thrown the ball. He's had 7 opportunities. There was a dropped interception at one point, so he could have thrown 4 in the Cincinnati game. I think there was a dropped interception there.
Okay, and he's been sacked 7 times in 4 games. So no, I mean, I would think that Penn State defensively, given how it has played so far this season, would be excited about the opportunity. Excited about the chance to create those types of plays in this game.
Yeah. So this is going to be, this will be our first question today. This comes from our friend on Twitter, Beaverman72, our favorite anthropomorphic beaver, who is he's sitting in section EE at Beaver Stadium right now. He asks, will Indiana be the first time this season that the defensive backs are actually tested vertically? How important will be the edge rushers to contain Michael Penix in the pocket? This is a super fascinating question. And when I said, what do I know about Indiana, is I don't really know. It depends on what Penn State does in the game plan. So that whole conversation we just had about where are the safeties? What are you doing to try and confuse the quarterback? What's your defensive game plan? Because there have been 2 so far in Power 5 games against Michael Penix. Iowa played Iowa. They just played their brand of football. They played zone coverage. They made them afraid of the defensive line and some timely run blitzes, and then made Michael Penix throw the ball underneath. So if that's the case, then no. Because Penn State can operate a similar game plan to Iowa in that sense. But Cincinnati ran a lot of cover 1. They ran a lot of man coverage. Guys nose to nose with receivers, trying to take away, as James Franklin described at one time, trying to take away everything. You're going to stack the box. You're going to play one-on-one outside. And if you have the athletes to do that, you can make a team ineffective on offense completely. So if Penn State decides, like they did against Villanova, to run cover 1, yes, they will be tested deep. They will have opportunities down the field to make plays both for the offense and the defense. But if Penn State plays coverage and they try to dominate the game by taking away the line of scrimmage with just 4, then it's going to be all about Brandon Smith and Peyton Hendershot. So to me, that's really the interesting thing is, what does Penn State think their best advantage is? Which way do they think they can dominate this game? Because I think the Penn State defense can dominate one of either way, but it's up to Brent Pry to decide.
And what type of game is it going to be for Penn State's offense? Like
Right.
What's a reasonable expectation for points against an Indiana defense that so far, confirm or not against the film, has not played the pass all that well, which right now seems to be the strength of this Penn State offense.
So it's always the same thing. When you watch a good football team, they always look better than they are athletically. And Indiana's a good coached football team. You know the names at this point. Micah McFadden, a great linebacker. Tywan Mullen, a great corner. Outside of that, there are plays to be made against this secondary. And there are plays to be made against the defensive line, who, again, tough, well-disciplined, smart football players that don't make mistakes, so they're going to get some plays. But athletically, you can have them. Like, there are plays to be made where they are out of position or you're just bigger, faster, stronger. So that's the tough read for me for Penn State in the offensive line that has been up and down. Are they going to have the up or the down this week?
I understand, too, that there's not a direct correlation or carryover from one year to the next. But I'm going to make an assumption here and say that things are probably not all that far. Like, people forget Penn State dominated yards in that game last year, like 2-1, right? I mean, 4 something to 2 something. And so, like, moving the ball even last year was not an issue. I would anticipate that would be something similar to carry over to this year, and particularly in chunk plays. I mean, they had explosive plays all day. Last season. So Jahan Dotson and some of these elements for Penn State are better this year than they were last year. Yeah, I would think that some of these guys are going to be able to, not only score, but score in bunches. Yeah.
So part of the narrative too is it was the very first game. It was like spring practice for Penn State last year. And, so this is always one of those things where if you're a quarterback, you hear sometimes quarterbacks, they'll make a throw that they would never make in a game during practice to see what happens, to see, like, can I fit that ball in there? If I'm late on this throw, how bad is it? Sean Clifford was throwing the ball directly to the other team last year. Like, I'm not exaggerating. That, like, I see it in my film review from last year. It's still up, bwi.rivals.com.
They were just standing there.
Yeah.
He wanted to get them involved.
So his first game in a new offense, that is not the case this year. This is the 5th game in this new offense, and one that he's operating much more effectively than he did the one last year. So I think you're right. To me, it just will become, and this is one of those things where Tom Allen is a good defensive coordinator, does the scheme and the system frustrate Mike Yurcich's system enough that it can keep the game close? My thought is no. I think Penn State has shown too many answers so far this season that Mike Yurcich and his in-game adjustments have been phenomenal. It's not waiting to halftime. It's not having to do, a conference to kind of figure out what you want to do. He can see it, and he sees it develop, and he fixes on the fly. So those are things that I think are a huge advantage for Penn State, and something you've talked about before, and this is a really important thing. Sean Clifford is a fifth-year senior. He's got a lot of time to watch film, and maybe the things he didn't see last year, he can see this year. So that's a huge advantage for Penn State. And on the flip side, Michael Penix, even last year, he threw a lot of, "You're really going to throw that?" footballs. The difference is, and I think the ACL is still a problem for him this year. So he's a left-handed quarterback, and he's throwing his plant foot. So his front foot, when he delivers the football, is the torn ACL. It's the second time he's torn it. So I think there's a bit of hesitancy, and there's a bit of accuracy issues that he maybe was getting lucky with last year, or he was developing to be one of those guys that could fit the ball into tight windows down the field last year. That has regressed. There's no doubt about it. And I don't know if it's a physical stability issue. I asked my strength and conditioning coach that lives with me, my wife, if that would be an issue, and she said from a strength perspective he should be fine, but it's a stability issue, which would affect accuracy. So I don't know if that's the case, but I don't know that you have to worry about him on the move. I don't think he's the same athlete he was after his third torn ACL.
I don't know if you know this, T. Frank, but I'm a torn ACL survivor myself.
Yes, tell me, please.
My accuracy is not nearly the same as what it used to be based on my plant foot. Just can't fit the ball into the windows that I used to.
Does it feel wobbly when you drive off your back foot?
It does. It feels wobbly when I drive a car.
I'll say, so the thing, I guess the thing about Michael Penix that is kind of clouding this is he'll throw from literally any platform. So he will throw off his back foot, off his front foot, off the side of his foot. That's when you're like, oh my God, you're throwing that? And then it's later, oh my God, you made that?
Michael Penix is in the quarterback takeover family of, this is maybe way too down the rabbit hole, but Sean Clifford's in that family as well. Those two were together over the summer for workouts. Quincy Avery, the flight school, Sean McAvoy, like there's a whole guru family down in Georgia. And Quincy Avery's deal is just what you said, throwing from any platform, being able to move that but I would guess that your assessment of Sean Clifford this year is that he is not doing that as much, or having to do that, right? Like,
so he's not. So he's been pressured, and he's been moved off the spot. Now there's some traditional mechanics of if you're running and throwing, you want your hips pointed towards your target. You don't want to be throwing and do that sort of like sling motion where you're pointing your body this way and you're throwing this way. That's where you get the volatility and accuracy. That has improved for Clifford. He's been able to be more accurate and disciplined on the run. And he's not throwing off of his back foot since the first 2 weeks of the season. He's been much more disciplined about not trying to load up and throw off an uneven platform. Now, part of that is he's had better platforms. Like the last 2 weeks, he's had better platforms. He has not had to worry about that. But the accuracy off the back foot is just volatile, and that's part of it. Unless you're Aaron Rodgers or one of these guys that are the exception to the rule, you should probably follow the rules.
Volatile means bad.
No, here's the thing. Keandre Lambert-Smith in the Wisconsin game. Sean Clifford throws off his back foot a frozen rope 47 yards down the field, hits him in stride. Perfect. He throws off his back foot and overthrows Jahan Dotson. He then, on a clean pocket, underthrows Jahan Dotson because of what he did before. It just causes a variety in outcomes. And the point about being a quarterback and consistent is having a predictable outcome. When you throw the football, I want it to go here. And that is what being accurate is about. So it is volatile. And sometimes you get great stuff, but more times than not, you need a receiver to make up for some inaccuracy issues. So yeah, if you want to say that's bad, then yes, but it's not always 100% bad. That's I guess the difference.
This is an education today, T. Frank. I love this.
Well, I watched a ton of film this morning, so that's all I've got on my brain. Like, I don't have some of the softer sciences today to talk about. I'm glad you brought that to the table for the first part of the show, because I've only got the hardwired stuff today. So here's a soft science question, as I'm going to call it.
Yeah, bring me back. Come on, man.
This is a question that we got, and I will paraphrase it. And because this is a question that we've had several times so far this season. Franklin has said openly that they are not using the COVID year whatsoever. But if Sean Clifford plays this way, is there an opening for a 6th year for Sean Clifford?
No.
I agree.
Nope.
Please expound. Please give us the meander through the meadow answer, because I think that the journey here is worth it.
Yeah. So and look, I was in the same boat, or a little bit of the same boat this summer, and that was something that I explored a little bit. And there are three perspectives on this, 2 that are tied together and another one separately. The first, and on its own, is the NFL does not want a 25-year-old quarterback that's a rookie.
Yep.
Bottom line, they don't want that. And so if Sean Clifford has aspirations to play in the NFL, which 99% of people, walk-ons or scholarship in college football do have those aspirations.
I'd say 70% of football fans in general want to play in the NFL.
Yeah, right. No,
I want to play in the NFL.
Yeah, I missed my 25 window, but still hoping.
Yep.
No, so that is a bottom line reality is he is 23 right now. If he stayed another season, he would be 24 for that season at Penn State, and then have his 25th birthday in I believe it's July of. But so before his first NFL training camp, he would turn 25.
And he didn't even go to BYU to make that somewhat acceptable.
There was no mission.
Nope.
There was no mission other than delivering a national championship to the Nittany Lions. No, so it's a non-starter from that perspective. Yep. And then the second avenue, which is to me more interesting and fun to talk about, is it was a no-win proposition in the first place. Of one of 2 things could have happened for Sean Clifford this year. He could have been middling and mediocre and struggled with the same types of things that he did last year.
Yep.
In which case, does Penn State want that quarterback back on its team for a 6th season? And the answer to that is no. You want to move, right? I mean, I'm
right.
No hurt feelings here, but no, if that had played out that way, then Penn State, it would not be in Penn State's interest to retain him or have him come back for a 6th season. But then the counter to that is, he plays really well. Well, if he plays really well, then of course Penn State wants him back. But there's no benefit for him to come back if he plays really well.
Yep.
And so the way that the season has gone this far, let's maybe tamp down the Heisman talk a little bit, but he's played well enough, Lord. And his numbers are
I haven't
good
seen
enough.
that. Luckily, I haven't seen that.
No, he's got odds now. He's on the big board.
Okay.
No, I know. Be still, T. Frank's heart.
He's played well for 2 weeks in a row, and I want to give him credit for that. And
that's half the season,
right? I've been saying this to my wife. I'm like, we're a quarter of the way through the season already. How about that? We're a quarter of the way through the season.
Crazy.
But it's still a quarter. It's not like we're not even halfway yet. So I agree completely with it's almost a binary situation of if he plays well, he's going to the NFL. If he doesn't play well, he's not playing at Penn State next year. And either way is an exit out the building. You would have to have some sort of really weird situation for him to come back. And even then, I think if you're weighing the options, I don't know that Penn State would want to do that, because it doesn't benefit the life cycle of your program.
Correct. And that's a part of it as well as, and this often comes up, not just the COVID year, but just in general, people, like to ask about 6 years, and it's not it might not be what you expect, but most of these guys don't want to be in college when they're 24. They just right, like, you're ready to move on with your life. And so even guys who have had a couple of years of injury, and when the medical red shirt was, a thing, and it still is a thing for some guys, right? It's exceedingly rare for not only for the program to want a guy like that back, right, like, that's its own situation, but the players themselves don't want to do that. Like, they don't want to stay in school. They would rather pursue whatever avenues it is, or avenue it is for them, whether it's the NFL or otherwise. That's typically how these things go. So
get
it out of your mind, guys. It's nope.
Yeah, and here's the other thing I want, because it feels like whenever I get these questions, it's kind of how do I do the mental gymnastics to get what I'm hoping for? Like, what you're hoping for is that Penn State, when they move on, if you're a fan, you're hoping that whatever quarterback next year is a viable championship level quarterback, and you have no information about Taquan Roberson or Christian Veilleux. So then it's, well, what about Clifford? How I've liked this. How do I keep this going? Yeah. And somebody asked me, what about name, image, and likeness? Mm-hmm. And I looked it up quickly. Even if you're part of your salary is guaranteed. Your signing bonus is guaranteed in the NFL if you're a rookie beyond the second round. And if you're a quarterback taken in the 6th or 7th round, Trace McSorley is a great example of, he was on the roster for the Baltimore Ravens for 2 years, and he's currently on the practice squad. So he's earning his 4 years of guaranteed money and the practice squad money. His career earnings over those 2 years was almost $1 million, $690,000 so far in the bank. No, there is not $690,000 next year to keep Sean Clifford out of the NFL. And that is a very specific situation with a comparable player in a lot of ways to Trace McSorley. You're not finding that much money in name, image, and likeness on this level to keep somebody in college as a 5th-year player. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, look, like, don't knock the hustle. The ingenuity it's a great place to come from. There are all kinds of things that we haven't thought of that, look, like, this is going to be a reality of college football moving forward, is these conversations will actually happen. It will be something worth exploring. And in certain circumstances that might be the case, but just my bedrock on this is 25. It's just that, he doesn't want to be 25 when he goes to the NFL. He's already going to be 24. Yeah. So that's nope.
It's so
great career.
I want to clarify. I'm not saying that the people who think that are silly, and it's not that it's a bad thought. My point is, this is where I catch myself of what's real and what is my wish. What is what I want to project on the world? Because I do this all the time of, like, well, if this, and this happens, then this will happen. And, what, professionally, personally, in things that you like, I'm a Bills fan. If I think X, Y, and Z will happen, then I've done too much of that in my life and then realized, is that reality or is that just what I want to happen? So that's always, whenever we have these conversations, I just want to point out to people, I'm not trying to kill your buzz. I'm trying to prevent you from the disappointment of what you are hoping for that has very little basis in reality. I don't want you getting too attached to that idea. That's all. I'm coming from a place of love. Everything I do comes from a place of love, including the run game conversation.
It's college football. Embrace the change.
Yeah.
Embrace it, because if you don't, that's not how it works.
This is the BWI Daily Edition. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. Nate, any last thoughts before we wrap up today? Anything you're thinking about heading into the second half of this week?
Yeah, no, it'll be good to get back to football because this week has felt particularly and in some ways created by James Franklin, right? Mm-hmm. Like, in some ways, his post-game comments on Saturday after Villanova led us down this path of being unfocused and undisciplined and all of the extraneous conversation. And you get it. You understand why he did that and what he wants to get out of it. But more so than I would say than other weeks, we've already reached the point where there's been enough talk. It's time to actually see this team in action on the field. So looking forward to Saturday night.
Well, speaking of more talk, the BWI Daily Edition coming back for 2 more days this week. We're still working on, I never want to promise anything too early, but we're working on getting an Indiana beat writer, give some inside information into what's going on with them so far this season. And then, of course, on Friday, Ryan Snyder's Best Bets. Make sure you come back for that and recruiting news from the insider himself. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, hit the notification button, and, of course, subscribe to us on YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow.